All right, moving from a linear economy to a circular one is a massive shift from the status quo. It's going to need businesses to shift and adapt the way they do things. And our panel today has people at the forefront of these shifts. We're going to be talking about business models, navigating circular pathways. And you heard a very, very inspiring speech here from Jennifer talking about her business. But our panellists are today Peter Thomas, Managing Director at Fuji Xerox New Zealand. Fuji Xerox is synonymous with leadership in document services, and they're committed to supporting a circular economy in New Zealand and across the Asia-Pacific region. Adele Rose is Chief Executive of 3R Group. Adele is passionate about helping businesses and their customers close the loop on products and packaging through product stewardship. And Oliver Hunt is the founder of MedSalve. I sort of name-checked at the start of the day. MedSalve takes single-use medical devices, reprocesses them, and then returns these to hospitals for reuse. MedSalve is driving change within the politically charged context of healthcare. And last but by no means least is Jennifer McIver that we heard from Wishbone. So we're going to have a quick presentation from each of our panellists, except for Jen, who we already heard from, and they'll present what they see as key opportunities, how they are taking advantage of that, and what others can learn from the journey. And then we're taking your questions. So keep those wonderful questions coming on slido.com. Very easy to use the app, and take it away from there. So a big round of applause for Peter Thomas.
Thanks a lot, Wallace, and good afternoon, everybody. Certainly very proud to be here today representing Fuji Xerox. And also really awesome to see how how Auckland and New Zealand organisations are starting to think about circular economy, and events like this now starting to see a lot more widespread support from a whole range of different people. So great to see a huge amount of people here today. Right, a couple of quick slides from me. Just briefly, I guess I'm going to talk about some of the things that our company does around product stewardship and supporting a circular economy. Sustainability is really in the DNA of our organisation. And right back in the mid-90s, as a company, this is not in New Zealand, this is across the region, we started using recycling parts in our equipment, which enabled us to extend the life of our products and provide more cost-effective solutions to some of our customers. Right now, today, we have a standard in Fuji Xerox right across the globe that requires all countries to recycle 99.5% of the equipment that we manufacture. That's a pretty staggering target when you think about some of the printers and photocopiers and other digital equipment that Fuji Xerox produces. But I'm really pleased to say that across the world we do manage to achieve that standard, and certainly here in New Zealand we're a little bit above 99.5%. In terms of the equipment we receive back from our customers and the toner that gets ultimately used and returned to us, 99.5% of that is recycled, so we're really proud of that statistic. That also allows us, by bringing equipment back and recycling parts, it enables us to save about $700,000 a year by improved utilisation around parts. So there's an example of how thinking circular can end up having some financial benefits as well. Given the amount of equipment that we take back from our customers on a daily basis, and particularly toner, by bringing it back and recycling it, we save 700 tonnes from our landfills here in New Zealand, which again is something that we're really proud of. And something that we've, maybe to give you an example of how some of this recycling helps not just Fuji Xerox, but helps other organisations, is that we've recently announced a partnership with Downer. It's been running in Australia for a little while, with Downer and Close the Loop, and we've recently launched that partnership here in New Zealand, where we're looking to take the used toner from our machines and actually put it into the asphalt that goes on our roads here. So we have an exciting trial of that coming up in New Zealand shortly. So again, that's an example of how some of the focus that we put into recycling and so on can also benefit other organisations and the communities of New Zealand. Let's quickly flip to the next slide. One of the other things that we've done this year is we strongly believe in the circular economy, and in particular product stewardship. And we believe that a focus on product stewardship is the first step towards a circular economy. And so what we've done is we provide some open source material that anyone can download for free from our website, which can give you a bit of a basic guide into product stewardship, how to think about it and how to make it work in your business. Because whilst it's something that's dear to our hearts, all organisations and all businesses, I believe, can think about product stewardship and think about the benefits to a circular economy from taking that approach. Maybe just before I finish, I just wouldn't mind touching on something Jennifer said in her presentation today, and you were talking about product as a service. One of the things we found in Fuji Xerox now is virtually 95% of our customers don't buy our equipment anymore. They lease it from us, which allows us to take that equipment back at the end of its life and recycle it and reuse it. So maybe it's something we can have a bit of a chat about later on. So that's a little bit about Fuji Xerox and what we're doing in the space, and I look forward to answering some of your questions shortly. Thank you.
Wonderful. Slido.com, keep those questions coming through. Adele Rose, Chief Executive of 3R Group.
Right, good afternoon everyone. It's really great to see the wide range of organisations that are represented here today, some really new faces than what we've met before, and so I think that means real hope for us in terms of New Zealand collectively driving the circular economy. So Drucker defined the term business models as assumptions about what a company gets paid for. He observed that organisations stagnate and eventually become irrelevant when they don't embrace evolving business models. And that's important as the business model drives assumptions, it shapes behaviour and dictates what we do, but more importantly what we don't do, and it also drives meaningful, impactful results. And that's really what we're talking about here when we're talking about the new but actually very old concept of the circular economy. It's purposefully impacting to drive meaningful results. Working with industry to develop stewardship schemes, we know that not one industry or business model fits all the products that we steward. So we draw on a range of business models to deliver impactful, measurable outcomes. And overridingly though, those are in the realm of collaborative and partnership models that specifically drive circularity. So whether we're talking about procurement decisions driving circular production, resource recovery influencing design or sharing platforms, all these benefit from a discipline of reimagineering the problem, applying rigour and measuring results continuously. So for each business phase a product or service travels through, we apply the waste hierarchy, guiding reduction or elimination of waste in every sense. And bringing that together, bringing the business phases and the waste hierarchy together, it exposes some easy wins as well as what might require legislative support to deliver meaningful impact. And whether our customers engage with us for economic, environmental, social or cultural benefits, it's clear to see where a positive environmental impact has occurred or can occur that has not been sacrificed at the expense of the economic impact. So for our customers, we use our own business model, which pulls in all the business phases that you would expect. As I said, it overlays the waste hierarchy and applies our continuous improvement cycle of reimagine, rigour and results. In closing, I think a business model that navigates circular pathways is unique to you as a business, but it has a long-term vision because this is a very long-term game, and it must harness the passion of your people that are within your business or surround your business that can envisage circularity. So it's really taking on that theme of to get quantum change, we need to really think differently. So as a leader, this is what will shape your behaviour and decisions about what you do and what you do not do within your piece of New Zealand's circular economy. Thank you.
Adele, thank you very much. And Oliver Hunt, founder of MedSalve.
Hi there. So I've chosen this slide for a number of reasons. Firstly, to show the part of the linear economy which we're coercing into a circle. And interestingly, this import is 97%. 97% of our medical equipment comes from other countries into New Zealand and at the moment to our landfills. But the other reason is to focus on the collection and disposal aspect, which is where I see a lot of low-hanging fruit in developing a circular economy. So with MedSalve, it's actually quite simple because all medical waste has to go to landfill in a very controlled manner. So we can take it from that point and then take what we need to reprocess and turn into a new device we can sell back to the hospital. And that part of it's actually easier than for many industries. But for other industries, especially in the consumer space, that's quite difficult. When you buy a bottle of Coke down at your countdown and you walk 10, 15, 200 kilometres away and then dispose of it, it makes it very difficult for people to create a scheme around that. So I think where people should be looking is in places where there's an easy collection and sorting or collection of the device. So construction and big sectors like that, manufacturing especially, are where some of the biggest areas for change fast, quickly, can happen. Obviously, it's quite difficult to do the other parts for medical devices because when you return that device to a hospital, it has to be very, very clean and it has to be in much the same condition as it was originally. Usually it's slightly different packaging because it's got a different brand on it. But when you look at waste that's been collected at the bottom of a construction site, you're getting a lot there, and as Eugenie Sage mentioned, most of that's going to landfill at the moment. So I think there's a lot of opportunities there to find low-hanging fruit and find easy opportunities to create circularity. Thanks.
Very cool. Thank you very much. Thank you. Actually, I might just start with a couple of questions of my own. First, I mean, you, Oliver, I mean, you're a young entrepreneur. Actually, how old are you, Oliver?
24.
24. Not that ages above, but wow, what I was doing at 24, I was fucking smoking pot, you know, and in a Dunedin flat, you know, but here you are. How did you get on the band, or how did you start, bro? I mean, in terms of, because I go up to Auckland Hospital.
Yeah, I get this frequently.
Yeah.
So I've got quite a few connections to the medical industry. My mother is a doctor. I used to be the mail boy at the Christchurch District Hospital. And it was actually 3 days before the election last year. My uncle's a surgeon and I was in his kitchen looking for a project for my Masters of Engineering Management. And I said, well, what happens if Labor gets in? What happens to the healthcare spending? And he turned around and he said to me, it doesn't matter how much money they spend, they need to look at the efficiencies. And then we then proceeded to walk into his garage where there was a box of medical devices that he couldn't use because they'd expired. He said, there's probably $400,000 worth of product in there. You should go and stick that through a gamma radiator and sell it to a hospital. And I was like, well, yeah, sure, I'll probably be able to just do that and walk in the front door and there's your money. So I went and talked to one of his business partners and found out there's actually an industry in the rest of the world which is worth approaching $2 billion annually in America, but it hasn't come to New Zealand. Part of that's because of our DHB system. We've got 20 DHBs for 4.5 million people. So to compare that to Melbourne, where they've got 4.9 million people, they've got one. Just a pet peeve. But
All right.
but yeah, so basically that. I found out there was an industry and I thought, well, why not in New Zealand?
Just in terms of the challenge before we move on, what are the particular challenges of dealing with medical waste? I'd assume that it would be quite significant.
Well, to be honest, we've started with low-hanging fruit ourselves.
Yeah.
So that's waste that can be classed as general waste, but is actually medical devices.
Sure.
So we're talking non-invasive stuff that goes on the outside of the body. But ultimately, it's the same treatment that you'd expect for medical waste for any waste disposal. And that's basically getting covered up to the same degree as they would have in an operating theatre,
Right.
which is where it comes from.
I'll ask the same question of you, Jennifer, because we're talking during lunch just of these great companies starting up and actually just doing such fantastic work, very inspiring. But how did you start? Did you see an opening in the toy market, or what was the lightning rod in your mind?
Our search for a better lifestyle with our family, mainly.
Right.
So Rich had designed a bike for our kid, as I explained, and 10 more people wanted one, and we wanted to find a way to pursue a passion and live the way we wanted to, doing our own thing, I suppose. So being an entrepreneur and having the freedom to run our own lives was a big thing.
Yeah.
But I also, before I started business, I was an environmental lawyer, and I bring that to it now.
Yeah. Nice time. Peter, Fuji Xerox has a sustainability policy. What are a couple of the key planks? I mean, you say that the company has a balanced long-term approach to economic activity, and we sort of touched on that with Shamaville Jakob in terms of the short-termism of today's modern economy. So touch on that a bit more. What are a couple of key planks?
Well, look, I think Fuji Xerox's aim, not just here in New Zealand, but our company ethos is to be here for the long term. It's a long-term sustainable organisation. We've been around since the 60s in New Zealand and have a view to the future where we could continue to add value to New Zealand organisations. And we think we can achieve that long-term sustainability not by thinking about short-term measures. For example, I could put a lot more profit into our organisation's coffers by chucking stuff into landfill.
Really?
But it's not the right thing to do.
Yeah.
So for us, it's about how do we think about those resources for long-term effect, bring them back in, recycle them, make our equipment last longer, give our customers a better service at a more effective price.
So it's just because as a large company, I'm just wondering where that comes from. I mean, does that stem from sound corporate governance? Is there buy-in from board level, obviously, or what? Where does
Absolutely.
that come
Look, it comes from our shareholder in Japan. Ultimately, it's they have a vision around improving the quality of life for people worldwide. Interesting vision for a company like ours to have, but that is the vision of the company in Japan. And so they set very strict rules for all the operating companies around the world to focus on sustainability, focus on recycling and reusability. So very much, as I said earlier on, in our DNA.
Very interesting. Adele, I was just reading something that you said in a report, your words here, that by 2015, maybe sooner, product stewardship will become just as familiar a term to consumers as fair trade or organically grown. Can you be sure about that?
Yeah, well, I think to achieve that, we're only limited by our own thinking. And one of the things that we've found recently is the mihi that we were given at the beginning of this conference, and it's happened at a few other places, really drawing on that long-term thinking, 800-year plan that's actually part of our culture in New Zealand. So, why can't we think visionary to get there in the future, and the steps just help us get there on the way?
Yeah. It's because you also said that no one on the street, if you go down into the Queen Street, no one on the street will understand the idea that makers and retailers take responsibility for the products they make and sell. I mean, it does sound like an odd concept at first, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It does. But eventually it will just be the way things are done, that you purchase a product, you know that you can take it back, that manufacturer has provided somehow the mechanism for you to return that at the end of its useful life. Fuji Xerox are a good example of that. And,
do you agree with what Adele is saying?
Yeah, I mean, you see it already in place in terms of packaging in Europe, don't you? Where, for example, supermarkets, I think, are obliged to take the packaging back for anything you purchase. So it's just a step-by-step process, and maybe New Zealand's not as far ahead as we could be.
Right. Oliver, what do you think?
Well, to be fair, it's a different space, but I see the opposite happening. In healthcare, convenience is trumping cost, often because the people using the devices don't pay for them. And so you're seeing a lot of things. I heard the other day, sheets at one of the local hospitals are going to be replaced by disposable sheets because they're more convenient. And I think there's incentives driven by manufacturers who are from outside of New Zealand to have that disposal, because they make more money when they sell a device 10 times rather than selling it once and having it cleaned by the hospital 9.
It's quite interesting you say. I'm quite interested because I've got to go to the hospital once a month. I've got to have this infusion. So I see the waste, and it's quite extraordinary, and it's kind of a hidden from view. For example, right? So you have an infusion, and you've got to have sort of 5 minutes of saline. Okay, so it usually requires a 20 ml or 30 ml sort of pack to have saline. So usually that's what you'd put up. What they do is they put a 1 litre one up. I said, why are you putting a 1 litre up? I'm only having 10 mils. And I said, I don't know, it's cheaper. And then it's thrown away.
Yeah, it's
extraordinary.
It's a problem, but I often ask people, well, when was the last time you saw hospital waste? And no one ever does, because it's in a skip underneath the operating theatres and it gets trucked off through one of the waste providers. So there is a problem there, and part of what I'm doing is trying to bring that into the light, because the reprocessing only applies to a very small percentage of the medical waste. There's so much more out there that can actually be dealt with in better ways than landfill that isn't reprocessing.
You reckon, Peter? Do you agree with that?
Oh, look, absolutely. And I think one of the things that sort of Ollie's touched on, and I think is really important for everyone to think about, it's actually about culture, and it's about how the people that work for your organisations see opportunity. So you talk about the Dhbs. What is the culture there that's causing people not to care about that stuff? And one of the things I find in our company is actually, we have a bit of a laugh before about the millennials. They're the ones that keep us honest. They're pushing us. They see things that we do.
Do you agree? Yeah, you really
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, basic things like some of the equipment we were bringing in from the factories in Japan was coming, the way it was packaged, we're having a lot of waste. And it was actually people in our workshop who wanted to do something about it. It wasn't the company seeing this as an issue. It was actually people in our company coming to me, coming to our sustainability team and saying, surely we can do better than this. And come back to that ethos of our company. You've got to create the culture where this becomes important. And once you do that, then I think things start to snowball.
Do you want to talk about sort of around the panel briefly on the intergenerational issue? Do you sort of take a sense of what Peter's saying in terms of the millennial aspect, or around the panel? Adele first.
Yeah. Well, one of the important questions is why. Why do you do something? Why are we doing this? Always challenging. That's how you get circularity of thinking, is you can always do better. And they seem to bring that to the workplace or to, organisations or systems. So, yeah,
Oliver?
thoroughly agree.
Really interesting from my industry is that actually about in the 80s, most of these devices that I'm looking at now were used again and again in hospitals. So I'm tapping into a cultural kind of rift almost, where there are people who are the experienced doctors, the experienced nurses, and some of those have gone into management as well. And they know that these devices were reprocessed. And then the other side of that is that a lot of the nursing staff spend their day-to-day lives trying to minimise their waste. Like I've heard stories of people with less than a swapper crate worth of waste per month or things like that. And they go to a hospital where they work and they create 3 or 4 times that in an hour. So they, more than anyone, want to reduce the waste. And if there's a cost saving, then the DHB wants it.
Right. And in terms of the intergenerational issue regarding the circular economy, what can you say to that, Jennifer?
Yeah, well, I can say that one of the things we're thinking is if we make our products, we target 1 to 5-year-olds. Yeah. So the idea is right at the beginning of their lives, they should learn to love their toys, love biking, all of these lifestyle changes that then they're 20 years' time, they're the parent and we'll still be around. Yeah, and they will have learned to love something that they repaired. I mean, we see people send us photographs of their kids, their 2-year-old who's fallen asleep in our wishbone bike box. Because we design the inside of it. Inside, actually, there's some imagery that you could cut out and make into a mobile in your room, or it's got sort of a play space on the lid of the box. And so they send photos of this. They send photos of their kids working with mum or dad to assemble the thing, And we're also thinking of ourselves as a maker company. So we're aiming to teach people to spend time with their products, and not be afraid. They receive the tools with the thing when they buy it, and just bring back some of the skills that we need to get involved with our own products.
Is a little bit, Jennifer, is a little bit of this, when you got me thinking about toys, when I'm thinking of sort of going to Nana's and stuff like that, and you've seen the big box of Meccano, what have you, or the wooden toys, might even be the Buzzy Bee, for goodness sake. There's a lot of back to the future in this, isn't there, really? I mean, yeah. What do you reckon?
Oh yeah, in fact, when we look for what's our next big thing going to be, we'll go back and say, okay, historically, what are the classic toys that had old school value, that opened up sort of a world of opportunity for the kid and didn't deliver all the solutions at once? How do we then bring the best of the future, technology and new manufacturing changes? How do we bring new sort of CAD design and other benefits that we've got now, new materials, to an old school product?
I'm going to go over to Rod Oram. Rod, what was your favourite toy growing up?
Oh, it's definitely a bicycle, actually, and I still have them.
You still have them?
Yeah, no, I bonded very early on with bicycles. But I just really wish I'd had a wishbone, because it was a clunky old metal thing. But no, the maker thing's really interesting, because my first proper bike I inherited from my older brother, and my father and I, well, mostly him, took it apart and repainted it. So there was a whole thing there, and looking after bikes and maintaining them is still a big thing now. So you're onto something really, really important. But no, that was very much, I have the bike by the bed, it's deep.
What about you, Nikki? What was the toy that you sort of grew up with? Maybe you could,
Well, I don't mean to copy, but I also loved my bike. I've always been a bicyclist, and I still am. I got asked how I got here today from Dunedin, and I really wish I could have said I biked, but I didn't. I flew.
Hey, any questions on for the panel on Slido? Let's just have a look if you get them up. Tony says, and keep them rolling through. Tony says, for Peter, what was the solution applied to the excess packaging coming from overseas?
I'm not the expert on that. My understanding was that we got the factories to use less polystyrene in with the way they were packaging machines, because it was taking up too much space, as well as creating all this polystyrene that we had no way of actually recycling here in New Zealand. So that was part of it. But I'm sure if the sustainability team got anything to add to that, they'll let me know.
Very good. Another one here, Peter. Why aren't all electronics manufacturers taking your approach?
I'm not too sure, actually.
Have a guess.
Certainly, I think it's about money. It's about money, because I think right now I don't see that there's the two things. One, it costs. It does cost money to have a recycling and take-back program for us. As I said, we're absolutely wedded to it. That's why we do it. But also, we don't see in the marketplace that people are prepared to pay more to deal with a company that has that ethos and one that doesn't.
Oh, really?
No, not at all. Not certainly not in our industry anyway. And I guess I see that more generally. Do you go, when you go and buy anything in the e-world, do you think about, I'm going to buy from that company because they have a more sustainable policy, or that they recycle or reuse? Think about that, do you?
I don't know. It's a good question. Would I? I don't know. I mean, what do you reckon, Adele?
Oh, definitely, but I think we're talking to the converted here as well. That's the general consumer, though, if they don't know what they're trying to measuring, or where you put the value, then you're not making an informed choice.
It comes back to price? Yep. Jennifer?
Yeah, we've had a tough year in Australia this year, so the economy is sinking or softening would be a nice way to put it. There's a drought over in Eastern Australia, and there's a competitor to Wishbone Bike hit the market, and so our sales have really come back a bit this year. And so what we're seeing is in tough times, they're not choosing the highest price in the category, that's us. They're obviously going to shop somewhere else for their product and get the cheaper version. And it's really made us sit back on our heels and say, God, this hurts. What are we going to do about it? And one of the things we have done is kind of walk the talk, that where we say we're all about well-being beyond just our financial success. So I think if you're a business that says, from the get-go, I'm building in some of these externalities into my costs. That will certainly help, because if you never have, then it's going to put you on, your bottom line in trouble. But secondly, if you really do believe that you're in business for more than just financial success, then you can last the yards. And our sense when I was just at a trade fair in Australia where we sort of checked out some of what's going on and what really are the drivers behind why it softened for us, we discovered an enormous strength of loyalty amongst those who have been using Wishbone. And while it isn't helping us grow this year, we've just been hearing from people who say growth for growth's sake. What's that for? Not necessarily that's not what we're in business for. So we look at other factors and other measures of success this year and say, actually, we're doing quite well, and I think in 10 years we'll still be here.
It's a very interesting sort of wider problem. I mean, maybe I should have directed to Shamabeel, but really, I mean, Jennifer, Peter, we have an economy predicated on growth. So if you go to an annual general meeting, the shareholders will be there. They don't want to hear the Nike chairman go, guess what? We achieved zero growth. Isn't it fantastic? Every single year at the AGM, that's got to be like a 3% growth, 4%. It's predicated on the system. Mm-hmm. So it's a big deal, huh?
It's a big challenge.
Yeah, big challenge. Oliver.
Systemic change required.
Yeah. Oliver, what are the barriers to working with the multiple DHBs, and how do you see local government playing a role in waste minimisation for the health sector? Asked Leah.
So I'll answer the first bit to start with. So working with multiple DHBs. Across the country we've got 20 DHBs. We've got 5 DHBs which have over 500,000 members or patients, potential patients. We've also got a whole bunch of other DHBs which have significantly less. But for all of those DHBs to sell a reprocessing scheme to them takes about the same amount of input, time, the customer acquisition cost is essentially the same. So what do you think that means for small DHBs like South Canterbury or Wairarapa DHB? They don't get it because it's not worth the time because they don't have enough devices for us to reprocess and give back to them at the same prices. Then there's the other problem of when you have multiple DHBs, they buy from different suppliers. So every process, every collection policy, everything like that has to be built to that specific device. Maybe it's a simple thing, maybe it's changing a bit of Velcro adhesion, but maybe it's completely different because it's a metal device that does the same thing, but it needs a different and differently designed jig. And so the other part of that question was with relation to local government. So I think there's two main ways that can help here. We've got really poor statistics around waste. Often they're guarded by the DHBs and only the DHBs can see them. So that would be great to know where we can target the most for this. And then supporting and funding the schemes to collect the devices. And obviously, you know, as I alluded to before, that's the critical part of getting the devices reprocessed. I suppose in direct contravention to what you were saying in your talk, the amount of material is directly linked to the amount of revenue because if we don't have the device to start with, that device is not going back to the hospital. So yeah.
Very, very cool, very interesting. Here's one, Adele. You said just in a report recently regarding the 15 government accredited product stewardship schemes, you say 14 schemes, quoting, is not a high number. It also isn't particularly impressive considering the Waste Minimisation Act 2008, which has stewardship at its heart. It's been around for 10 years. So why is such a low number, do you reckon?
Well, it requires every part of the supply chain to work in concert to get it really effective. So there are actually more than 14 schemes, there's just 14 accredited schemes. But it can take somewhere upwards of 8 years for a scheme to actually go from design phase through to delivery and have the manufacturers of the waste and the users of the waste and the recipients of the waste or product, whatever you want to think of it, engaged all throughout that process. So there have been some barriers, and one of the barriers is that for some of the highly hazardous waste or highly hard to manage waste, we need legislative support. And so that's what Minister Sage was talking about this morning, is enacting that part of the Act that is really cool around mandatory stewardship. It's just a lever around product control that enables a fair and even playing field. So.
One question for all. Leah asks, so have you found it to be a challenge changing the mindsets of your clients, and have you any recommendations for kick-starting societal culture change? That's a big final one, perhaps. What do you think? A question for all. Peter, you start.
I'm just trying to read it again, it's gone now.
Have you, where is it?
Changing mindsets and kick-starting.
Yeah.
Any challenges changing your clients, your customer?
I'll change it, yeah.
mindset?
Look, I mean, one of the things we see is, often we're in a situation where we're tending for a business and other organisations who set the procurement standards only look at sustainability maybe as only 5% of the weighting of the decision they make. Most of it's still made on price. And, I think what I'd like to see is more organisations in New Zealand, particularly government, put a higher ratio on sustainability when it comes to making decisions on which suppliers to use.
Right.
I think that's something that I see as a real opportunity.
Brief response around the panel, Adele?
Yeah, so it depends where the customer's jumping in point is. If it's money, then yes, take-back solutions, stewardship solutions, they cost. So if money's your only driver, it's going to be very hard to convince them. I don't have an answer to the other one around...
I would say exactly what Peter said. The government can't really have all these great sustainability targets and then in the back corner be telling their procurement to be buying stuff that isn't sustainable because it's a contradiction. And in terms of flipping confidence for customers, I usually actually just pull up a slide and go, this is what's happening in America, Canada, Germany. We've got big companies like Fisher & Paykel Healthcare and other healthcare companies here. We should have it here.
Yeah, so before Jennifer, you answer that?
I need to say for a kickstart, maybe use rock stars. You know, and I think in every sector there's the rock stars that people, that I mean to say celebrities or just, but they may not be. In your industry they'll be someone different than they are in your industry. But those people who are the sexy hot people, you know, and who are on social media saying they think these are the ones that we have to talk to, and who then, opinion leaders, influencers, but
Influencers.
important ones,
Education.
Like you, for example.
Sexy hot.
Honestly.
No,
Thank you. Thank you. Hey, look, round of applause for this panel here. Jennifer, Ollie, Adele, Peter, thank you so much.